glad you're here. This is the audio version of the book Peak, Parents of Estranged Adult Kids, a resource for recovery, authored by Faye Anam Avis. Introduction. This book is written to serve as a resource for parents with estranged adult kids. If you are an estranged parent, little more needs to be said about the need for this book. You have likely been wandering about in a silent wilderness with little to comfort or guide you. You may have talked with friends or consulted with a physician, clergy person, or even a professional therapist and found little help. There are few situations more agonizing in life than to find that your adult child has cut off communication with you and possibly you from your grandchildren. Personally, I have experienced the loss of a best friend in war, the tragic death of my only sister in a car accident, the murder of my sister-in-law, the total loss of every financial asset, and despair so deep that I nearly took my own life. I can say without qualification that the estrangement from my adult children and grandchildren has been more painful than in any of these other experiences. I can say with equal conviction that estranged parents can find hope and healing. As the author of this book, I make 4 assumptions about you as an estranged parent. 1. I assume that intense pain and confusion is your starting point. Therefore, it will not help to simply dive into quick answers that ignore the feelings you are experiencing as a result of parental estrangement. 2. I assume that parental estrangement is interfering with your ability to live a full and productive life. Parental estrangement has multiple impacts ranging from psychological to financial to medical. I assume that you are, 3. I assume that you are ready to enter a process of recovery. In other words, you are ready to begin taking responsibility for your own well-being and take steps to emerge from the negative impacts of parental estrangement. 4. I assume that you are open to new information and perspectives about your relationship with your adult kids. As in many other situations in life, much of what keeps us trapped in the pain of parental estrangement are patterns of thinking that are unhelpful. Key to recovery is the ability to change our minds. That is, the way we perceive what is happening to us. Parental estrangement as trauma. This book takes you on a journey that begins with the understanding that parental estrangement is a trauma. Trauma is an emotional response to an unexpected, deeply distressing event. One of the common characteristics in the stories of estranged parents is the element of shock. Beginning with the day of their child's birth, and continuing through all the seasons of their nurture, it never occurred to most parents that one day the relationship with that child would come to an end, either suddenly or after years of on and off communication. Dealing with parental estrangement engages us in a process of trauma recovery. We are familiar with physical traumas like automobile accidents. The recovery from the trauma of an automobile accident may require surgery, medication, physical therapy, and rest, all engaged over a period of months. Similarly, recovering from the psychological trauma of parental estrangement also requires commitment to an intentional program over a period of time. Even reading a chapter of this book every few days for several weeks can make a substantial contribution to your own recovery process. Overcoming isolation. While other parents are engaged in the expected ritual of swapping photos and catching up on the latest communication, estranged parents are left with meager attempts to try to cover up the fact that they have neither. They feel they must hide their estrangement, given the substantial amount of stigma and shame surrounding parental estrangement. Because this discourages open, honest conversation, it fosters the mistaken belief that parental estrangement is rare. This has the effect of isolating parents in their pain and confusion. In fact, parental estrangement is a common experience in both the United States and Europe, affecting millions of parents, along with their adult kids and grandkids. Just because estranged parents are not talking about their experiences does not change the fact that estrangement is having a profound impact on their lives. Those impacts are similar to any other major family dysfunction that renders life unmanageable, including addictions to drugs, alcohol, gambling, or pornography. In spite of the distinctiveness of every family, many of these characteristics are shared by all estranged parents. Critical to the recovery process is the ability of estranged parents to speak honestly with one another about their experience. There are several obstacles to be overcome. First, it may be difficult to discover other estranged parents. As a partial remedy, I am also developing resources for a support network I am calling PEAK, Parents of Estranged Adult Kids. By joining a PEAK group, parents can find others who are willing to talk about their experience. A second obstacle is the issue of family loyalty. Parents often feel bound by an unspoken code that forbids them from talking about problems with those outside the family. A final obstacle is the belief that seeking help for parental estrangement simply adds one failure upon another. Overcoming these obstacles is part of the early work of recovery. Estranged parents must be able to talk about the multiple ways that estrangement is impacting their lives. Estrangement is a form of shunning, and estranged parents need to have an understanding of all the ways that they are impacted, emotionally, spiritually, even medically. Estrangement also involves loss, and loss triggers a grief reaction. In addition to the common grief reactions of shock, denial, anger, guilt, and bargaining, estrangement is characterized by something known as ambiguous loss. Because there is always the hope, however faint, that the relationship will be restored, estranged parents find it difficult to navigate through acceptance in a way that enables them to move on with their lives. Estrangement also threatens a parent's ability to make meaning of their lives. Raising children to adulthood represents the most significant investment of time, energy, and money that most people will make. Estrangement calls the value of that investment into question. What was the point? Practical consequences. Beyond the substantial emotional impacts of estrangement are the practical consequences. Who will take care of them in their years of decline and eventual death? How will they handle their estate? What should they do on holidays when everyone else is celebrating with children and grandchildren? Estranged parents in recovery must be able to talk about all these impacts. Parental estrangement is not only traumatic, but also touches upon some of the deepest questions of life, such as, what is the meaning of my life? Am I loved? Am I forgiven for my failures? Do I deserve to be happy? Because these questions cannot be addressed from a purely human perspective, I believe that recovery from parental estrangement requires assistance from a spiritual source that alone has the ability to restore us to lives that are full and productive. Not only does this spiritual source offer the unconditional love that heals us, but also the wisdom to guide our recovery process. The causes and mystery of parental estrangement. The causes of parental estrangement are varied and complex. Behaviors in a parent that lead to estrangement from one child are easily overlooked by another child, even in the same family. In some cases, children are able to view a failure in a parent's relationship with a spouse as separate from the relationship of the parent with them. In other cases, a failure in the marriage of the parents is seen as a betrayal of the family, and children feel compelled to side with one parent or another. Personality differences between parent and child can form irreconcilable differences in spite of their best efforts. Cultural differences introduced by mixed marriages can also prove insurmountable. In all cases, it is safe to say that human beings will be subject to human frailties. Mistakes will be made, sometimes a series of mistakes. It is not necessary to conclude that a particular fail caused the estrangement. What we can say is that we can never be fully released from the guilt and shame that keeps us stuck until we open ourselves to self-examination. We do this with confidence that there is no failure so irredeemable that can ultimately separate us from the love of our spiritual source, whom some choose to call God. This introduces us to a quality of spirituality that many may never have experienced in their religion. As one person put it, religion is for people who are afraid of going to hell. Spirituality is for people who have been there. It is helpful for estranged parents to realize that we are not alone and that our spiritual source loves us unconditionally. Taking steps to share with other estranged parents is courageous and healing. For many estranged parents, this is not enough. In the words of one author on parental estrangement, they are done with the crying and ready to move on. This requires some new ways of thinking about the relationship with our adult children. This is the part of the book that runs counter to nearly every holiday commercial, Hallmark movie, and religious sentimentality. This is the part of the book where you, as an estranged parent, are most likely to find yourself saying, yes, but. Wrestling with these ideas is a normal part of the process, as long as you remain open. Ultimately, we all need to exhaust our best attempts to solve the problem on our own. When we reach that point, we become open to other possibilities. Rethinking parental estrangement. First, we are going to have to rethink our understanding of the relationship between parents and children over the course of their lifetimes. Our assumption is that in a normal family, parents and children have a responsibility to stay in relationship until, like marriage, death do them part. Is this necessarily true? I would argue that it is not. By the time an adult child reaches 30 years of age, the essential work of parenting has been completed. I call these completed children. At that point, an adult child has every right to move on with their lives totally independent of their parents, and many do. Likewise, a parent has the right to move on as well into a time in their lives when they will have responsibilities and needs other than those of rearing children, retiring, relocating, reflecting on the past, and preparing for their eventual decline and death. Some adult children will feel ready to make the transition from being cared for to caring for their aging parents. I call these transitioned children. Transitioned children are likely to form bonds with their aging parents that completed children will not. Second, we need to accept the fact that the relationships between parents and adult children are privileged and voluntary. It is beneath the dignity of any adult relationship that one should have to beg another for consideration. Whatever the shortcomings in either individual, a relationship is a privilege offered freely to another. When all the emotional power in a parent-adult-child relationship has shifted to one or the other, neither benefits. The relationship is dead and should be grieved as such. Third, estrangement can often be viewed as an acceptable solution to a problem. Rather than viewing estrangement as a problem to be solved, we may need to view it as a solution to an otherwise unsolvable problem. Unsolvable problems are created in situations like these. Relationships that force extremely different personality types into situations they otherwise would not choose. People with significantly different personalities sometimes only serve to make one another miserable. The requirement that they suffer through mandatory family gatherings makes little sense. Relationships that serve as a reminder to one or both parties of unforgivable past failures. Contrary to what we would like to believe, some personal failures result in ruptures that are simply unrepairable. In a relationship, each is reminded of the breach. One is re-traumatized and the other is re-guilted. No one wins. Relationships that require people deal with fundamentally irreconcilable differences in culture or core values. More than ever, we live in a global community, and adult children often choose partners who have very different views of family, the obligations of parents to adult children, and vice versa. When these differences are presented with a low degree of appreciation or even tolerance towards others, a decision to part ways may be the better choice. Relationships that place either parents, children, or both in loyalty binds that apply pressure toward exclusivity. Divorce is a major factor in estrangement, usually because adult children feel the need to blame or exclude one parent over another. Ending the relationship is often a choice that adult children feel they must make as a way of avoiding ongoing conflicts with one or both parents. It is always possible to try to simply avoid dealing with these problems, but the results, chronic conflict, deepening resentments, losses of esteem, and generational impacts on grandchildren can be devastating. A decision that continuing the relationship is too high a price to pay for everyone involved can be a responsible, moral choice. This brings me to the fourth change we must make in the way we think about estrangement. Acceptance is not only appropriate, but the foundation of a full and productive future for an estranged parent. Whereas the ambiguous loss of estrangement prevents many parents from moving through the entire grief process to acceptance, fully recovered estranged parents have accepted that the relationship with their adult children is over, or reconciliation has been delayed. This does not mean that it might not be reestablished at some future point, but if it is, it will not be a restoration to a past relationship, but the creation of a new one on different terms. Acceptance enables estranged parents to move on with their lives in ways that are essential to their well-being. This includes forming new relationships, sometimes with surrogate children and grandchildren, establishing new interests and opportunities for service, planning for their future care, and dealing with legal, financial, and logistical issues. The fifth and final change of thinking has to do with nothing less than the meaning of life. There are many sources of meaning. Having adult children who desire to have a relationship with you is not the sum total of your life. Other sources of meaning include friendships, personal growth, vocation, hobbies, spirituality, service to others, education, even learning to turn pain into gain. For most people, 2/3 of their lives will be spent doing something besides raising children. Jesus had no children. Buddha had one son that he named Impediment, indicating the concern that a child might impede his search for enlightenment. Only one of Muhammad's 7 children outlived him. The significance of their lives was measured in other terms. Yet estranged parents are tempted to measure the significance of their lives based only on the success of their family life or the lack of it. Changing the way you think about the meaning of your life requires nothing less than an intentional, countercultural life view. This book will help you do that. There is no intention in this book of diminishing the beauty of family relationships that endure across multiple generations. Hundreds of books and media productions have been written to dramatize, guide, and celebrate those relationships. Unfortunately, there are a large number of parents today whose children have indicated that they want no part of such relationships. Without passing judgment on their motives, it is important to face the impact of that decision and work to relieve the suffering of those parents who deserve to move forward in their lives with dignity, purpose, and even joy. I make no attempt in this book to analyze broader social patterns that are contributing to parental estrangement, nor do I provide a laundry list of causes with ideas for fixes. I will leave that task to other authors who are more qualified than I. Parents who are looking for a moral case to be made against their children will not find it in this book. Likewise, children who are seeking support for breaking from a toxic family situation will not find that in these pages either. Those books have been written and have value. I am assuming that estrangement is a stubborn reality that parents need help addressing in order to move forward, whatever the case, or however worthy it may be. Practically speaking. Now for some practical matters. I have written this book with the hope that it can be beneficial in a variety of settings. I hope it will be useful for individuals to read and reflect on. For some people, simply reading a book is enough to help them feel affirmed and less alone. Others will benefit from a group experience where the book serves to start a discussion about parental estrangement. To that end, I have included some questions for reflection and discussion at the close of each chapter. Others may want to be more intentional and start a peak recovery group in their community. I have designed some materials for a peak group that you may find helpful as used in conjunction with this book. You'll find contact information in the About the Author section at the end of the book. Another way of using the book would be to give it to friends or family members as a way of educating them about what you are going through. If you find the book helpful, You also may want to give it to any caregivers, like clergy, physicians, or counselors who are supporting you. Alternatively, you can copy Appendix B, a letter to friends, in the back of this book, and give it to others as a starting point. I strongly discourage giving the book to estranged adult children. If you are an estranged child, this book may help you as a way to listen in. While I have worked hard not to assign blame for parental estrangement, the needs of parents are quite different from those of adult children, and no one book can meet the needs of both. We live in a day when we need older adults who can bring their skills, learnings, and energy to the table in addressing the problems of the world. To have several million people in our country alone who are sidelined by the impacts of parental estrangement is a waste we cannot afford. These people have not only accumulated a lifetime of skills and expertise, they will be the source of the greatest migration of wealth ever to hit humanity. The unprecedented flood of money, 4 times the size of the U.S. gross domestic product, that will be passed along to a younger generation over the next half-century. We need this generation to be as vital, energized, and positively engaged as possible. A generation of dispirited, guilt-ridden, disengaged, and emotionally crippled adults is simply not acceptable. Questions for reflection and discussion. What led you to begin listening to this book? What are you hoping for? This introduction is roughly an outline of the topics covered by the book. Recall back 3 sentences or paragraphs that seemed particularly relevant to you. What about those topics stood out for you? How did the introduction leave you feeling after you heard it? If you are using this book in a group discussion, what do you gain from hearing others speak or from speaking? Is there anyone else it would be helpful for you to give this book to? Thank you for listening in to this section of the book, Peak, Parents of Estranged Adult Kids. Please help other estranged parents learn about this group and this YouTube channel by clicking like below, by clicking subscribe, and by clicking the bell so that you get notifications each time we upload new sections to the book or new videos. Thank you.